Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the most mind-bending paradoxes in human history. Just imagine for a second, the world's most powerful, undisputed king. We're talking absolute authority, massive armies, unimaginable wealth. Now, imagine that same terrifying tyrant being completely brought to his knees, literally defeated, by the smallest, most insignificant creature you can think of, a single mosquito. I mean, how does that even happen, right? Today, we're breaking down the epic clash between Prophet Ibrahim and King Nimrod. It's an absolute masterclass from historical texts that explores how unchecked worldly arrogance is ultimately humbled.
Okay, let's dive right into this. On one side of the ring, you have the ultimate archetype of a tyrant king. We're talking millions of troops, total unchecked power, and a literal god complex. On the other side, a single, fragile, broken-winged mosquito. It honestly sounds like a joke, doesn't it? But this comparison perfectly frames the core irony of the whole tale. It's this epic historical confrontation between massive worldly arrogance and ultimate divine power.
So, to really get how we reach that showdown, we have to rewind a bit to the dark era of ancient Babylon. This was centuries after the Great Flood. Civilization had rebuilt itself, and Babylon was its glittering center. But instead of worshiping the Creator, the people had turned heavily toward idolatry. And enter King Nimrod. Historical accounts tell us he was actually the very first king to ever place a crown on his head, and he ruled with a brutal iron fist for 400 long years.
Now, 400 years of absolute, unquestioned rule? That does something incredibly dangerous to the human ego. Nimrod's hubris reached a point where he straight up declared himself Rab, the Lord and sustainer of his people. He looked at his colossal wealth, his unmatched army, and genuinely believed he'd transcended humanity to become a god. But then, he has this terrifying dream, a dream of a blinding star outshining the sun and the moon. It totally shattered his peace. His astrologers gave him a really grim interpretation. A boy was soon going to be born in his kingdom who would completely destroy his reign.
As you can guess, absolute panic sets in, and that leads to a truly horrifying decree, the slaughter of all newborn boys in Babylon. It was a dark, terrifying time. Spies were watching every pregnant woman. But as the narrative emphasizes, human decrees just cannot override divine will. A pious mother actually managed to completely hide her pregnancy from the king's guards, and when the time came, terrified that a baby's cry would alert the soldiers, she fled into the wilderness. She went to a dark, secret cave to give birth to the prophesied child, Prophet Ibrahim.
Fearing for his life, his completely heartbroken mother had to make an impossible choice. She left the infant in the cave, trusting his fate entirely to the Creator. But here's the amazing part. The infant didn't just survive alone in that cave, he thrived. The traditional accounts detail these breathtaking miracles of divine protection. He was miraculously sustained just by sucking his own fingers, drawing milk from his thumb, honey from his index finger, and butter and nutrients from the others. He grew at an astonishing, miraculous rate, completely hidden away from Nimrod's wrath.
Now, growing up totally isolated in that cave actually gave young Ibrahim this incredibly unique, uncorrupted view of the world. When he finally stepped out, he started questioning reality itself through a really profound philosophical journey. He observed a brilliant star, but by morning, it set. He saw the glorious moon, but it faded. Even the massive sun disappeared at night. And his logical conclusion was incredibly sharp for his time. He figured celestial bodies that fade away, they can't possibly be the true creator of the universe. The true creator has to be eternal.
So the crucial point is how he took this realization straight to the people, starting with his own father Azar. And Azar wasn't just anyone, he was Nimrod's chief priest, the master idol maker. Ibrahim completely rejected these clay statues. He confronted his father with this devastating logical challenge. He asked, "Why do you worship what cannot speak, hear, or protect itself?" It was a profound question that completely dismantled the foundations of a society that was just blinded by tradition and fear.
But, Ibrahim didn't stop at just asking questions. He set up this absolutely brilliant physical demonstration. When the entire city left for a massive festival, Ibrahim stayed behind. He went into the main temple, took an axe, and smashed all the small idols to pieces. But here is the genius part. He left the axe hanging right on the shoulder of the largest unbroken idol. When the furious crowds came back and accused him, he just pointed to the big idol and said, "Ask him. He's the one with the axe." He forced his people into a logical trap, making them admit out loud that their own gods were completely powerless to speak or defend themselves. Naturally, this legendary act of rebellion drags Ibrahim directly in front of the tyrant himself. We're talking an epic courtroom showdown here. Nimrod sits there totally arrogant, claiming he's a god who controls life and death just because he can execute or pardon a prisoner on a whim. But Ibrahim completely dismantles Nimrod's fake god complex with one undeniable challenge. He says, "My lord brings the sun from the east. Bring it from the west." Nimrod was utterly speechless. Absolute silence fell over the mighty court.
So, unable to win the intellectual debate, Nimrod resorts to brute force. He orders the construction of a fire so massive it literally looked like a mountain. They gathered wood for days. The heat was so incredibly intense that historical accounts say birds couldn't even fly over the area without dropping dead from the sky. They actually had to build a giant catapult just to hurl Ibrahim into this unprecedented inferno from a safe distance.
The catapult releases. The crowd watches the young prophet fly straight into the flames. But then, the texts describe a stunning miracle. A divine command is given. "O fire, be coolness and safety upon Abraham." According to the narrative, the very nature of the fire was altered in an instant. It didn't burn him. Instead, it became this peaceful, cool sanctuary. When the flames finally died down, Abraham just walked out completely unharmed, radiant with spiritual light. Nimrod's ultimate weapon was rendered absolutely useless.
Let's see how this builds. Because instead of humbling himself after witnessing something like that, Nimrod's arrogance just skyrockets. He descends into total madness. He commands his forces to build a massive tower to the heavens so he could literally go up and fight Ibrahim's god. Standing at the top, he shoots an arrow into the sky. And through what the texts describe as a divine test, a concept known as istidraj, or divine leeway, the arrow returns to the ground covered in blood. Nimrod was ecstatic. He falsely, crazily believed he had successfully killed the god of the heavens. Believing himself completely victorious, his arrogance hits its absolute peak. He challenges Ibrahim to bring forth his god's army for a final war. The battle lines are drawn. On one side, you have Nimrod marching out with millions of heavily armed soldiers, unmatched ancient technology, glittering armor, the works. On the other side, the divine forces. But it wasn't angels with flaming swords. It was a terrifying, sky-darkening swarm of mosquitoes. These tiny creatures easily bypassed the soldiers' heavy armor, completely devastating and consuming Nimrod's mighty Babylonian army in a matter of moments. Now, what's really interesting about this part of the story is the exact number it took to finish the job. Nimrod's mighty army is wiped out, but the cowardly king manages to flee back into his fortress and barricade the heavy doors. But, as these narratives show, human defenses mean literally nothing against divine will. It took exactly one mosquito. And not just any mosquito, a crippled, broken-winged mosquito. That's all it took to bypass all his security. This tiny disabled insect flew right up Nimrod's nose and lodged itself deep inside his brain.
And that brings us to the ultimate humiliation. I mean, the man who wore the first crown, the tyrant who claimed to be the lord of the earth, reduced to begging for pain. For the rest of his miserable life, and historical sources mention this lasted for 400 years, matching the exact length of his arrogant rule, King Nimrod could only find temporary relief from the agonizing, continuous buzzing in his brain by having his own servants beat his head with their shoes. He ruled the world, but lived out his days begging to be hit with footwear until a final massive blow cracked his skull, ending his tyranny in the most pathetic way imaginable.
Looking back at this entire journey, it leaves us with 3 really profound thematic lessons. Number 1, arrogance inevitably leads to a downfall. The higher the ego, the harder the crash. Number 2, the narrative emphasizes that worldly power, wealth, and technology, no matter how vast they seem to us, are incredibly fragile when stacked against the divine. And number 3, standing by your truth provides its own sanctuary. Just as the text describes the fire protecting Abraham, alignment with truth offers a really profound internal resilience.
To wrap things up, I want to leave you with this really provocative thought from the scholar Imam Shafi'i. Allah created the mosquito to show arrogant tyrants how insignificant their power is against his punishment. It really makes you reflect on the true nature of power in our world today, doesn't it? The things we think make us invincible, our wealth, our status, our technology, they're all remarkably fragile if we lose our humility. Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.